J. Bruce Ismay. Joseph Bruce Ismay, 12 December 1862, 17 October 1937, was an English businessman who served as chairman and managing director of the White Star Line. In 1912, he came to international attention as the highest-ranking White Star official to survive the sinking of the company's new flagship RMS Titanic, for which he was subject to severe criticism. Early life. Ismay was born in Crosby, Lancashire. He was the son of Thomas Henry Ismay, 7 January 1837, 23 November 1899, and Margaret Bruce, 13 April 1837, 9 April 1907, daughter of ship owner Luke Bruce. Thomas Ismay was the senior partner in Ismay, Imray and Company, and the founder of the White Star Line. The younger Ismay was educated at Elstree School in Harrow, then tutored in France for a year. He was apprenticed at his father's office for 4 years, after which he toured the world. He then went to New York City as the company representative, eventually rising to the rank of agent. Bruce was one of the founding team of Liverpool Ramblers Football Club in 1882. On 4 December 1888, Ismay married Julia Florence Shefflin, 5 March 1867, 31 December 1963, daughter of George Richard Shefflin and Julia Matilda de Laplin of New York, with whom he had 5 children. Margaret Bruce Ismay, 29 December 1889, 15 May 1967, who married George Ronald Hamilton Cheap, 1880, 1957 in 1912, Henry Bruce Ismay, 3 April 1891, 1 October 1891, Thomas Bruce Ismay, 18 February 1894, 27 April 1954, who married Jane Margaret Seymour, Evelyn Constance Ismay, 17 July 1897, 9 August 1940, who married Basil Sanderson, 1894-1971 in 1927, George Bruce Ismay, 6 June 1902, 30 April 1943, who married Florence Victoria Edrington in 1926. In 1891, Ismay returned with his family to the United Kingdom and became a partner in his father's firm, Ismay, Imray and Company. In 1899, Thomas Ismay died, and Bruce Ismay became head of the family business. Ismay had a head for business, and the White Star Line flourished under his leadership. In addition to running his ship business, Ismay also served as a director of several other companies. In 1901, he was approached by Americans who wished to build an international shipping conglomerate, to which he agreed to sell his firm to the International Mercantile Marine Company. Chairman of the White Star Line. After the death of his father on 23 November 1899, Bruce Ismay succeeded him as the chairman of the White Star Line. He decided to build 4 ocean liners to surpass the RMS Oceanic built by his father. The ships were dubbed the Big Four: RMS Celtic, RMS Cedric, RMS Baltic, and RMS Adriatic. These vessels were designed more for size and luxury than for speed. In 1902, Ismay oversaw the sale of the White Star Line to J.P. Morgan and Company, which was organizing the formation of International Mercantile Marine Company, an Atlantic shipping combine which absorbed several major American and British lines. IMM was a holding company that controlled subsidiary operating corporations. Morgan hoped to dominate transatlantic shipping through interlocking directorates and contractual arrangements with the railroads, but that proved impossible because of the unscheduled nature of sea transport, American antitrust legislation, and an agreement with the British government. White Star Line became one of the IMM operating companies, and in February 1904, Ismay became president of the IMM with the support of Morgan. RMS Titanic. In 1907, Ismay met Lord Peary of the Harland and Wolff shipyard to discuss White Star's answer to the RMS Lusitania and the RMS Mauretania, the recently unveiled marvels of their chief competitor, Cunard Line. Ismay's new type of ship would not be as fast as their competitors, but it would have huge steerage capacity and luxury unparalleled in the history of ocean-going steamships. The latter feature was largely meant to attract the wealthy and the prosperous middle class. 3 ships of the Olympic class were planned and built. They were in order RMS Olympic, RMS Titanic, and RMS later HMHS Britannic. In a highly controversial move, during construction of the first 2 Olympic-class liners, Ismay authorized the projected number of lifeboats reduced from 48 to 16, the latter being the minimum allowed by the Board of Trade, based on the RMS Olympic's tonnage. Ismay occasionally accompanied his ships on their maiden voyages, and this was the case with the Titanic. During the voyage, Ismay talked with either or possibly both Chief Engineer Joseph Bell or Captain Edward J. Smith about a possible test of speed if time permitted. After the ship collided with an iceberg 400 miles south of the Grand Banks of Newfoundland on the night of 14 April 1912, it became clear that it would sink long before any rescue ships could arrive. Ismay stepped aboard Collapsible C, which was launched less than 20 minutes before the ship went down. He later testified that as the ship was in her final moments, he turned away, unable to watch. Collapsible C was picked up by the Carpathia about 3–4 hours later. After being picked up by the Carpathia, Ismay was led to the cabin belonging to the ship's doctor, Frank Magee. He gave Captain Rostron a message to send to White Star's New York office: "Deeply regret, advise you Titanic sank this morning 15th after collision iceberg, resulting serious loss, life, further particulars later." Bruce Ismay. Ismay did not leave Dr. Magee's cabin for the entire journey, ate nothing solid, and was kept under the influence of opiates. Another survivor, 17-year-old Jack Thayer, visited Ismay to try to console him despite having just lost his father in the sinking. Ismay was staring straight ahead, shaking like a leaf. "Even when I spoke to him, he paid absolutely no attention. I have never seen a man so completely wrecked." When he arrived in New York, Ismay was hosted by Philip Franklin, vice president of the company. He also received a summons to appear before a Senate committee headed by Republican Senator William Alden Smith. Ismay later testified at the Titanic disaster inquiry hearings held by both the U.S. Senate chaired by Senator William Alden Smith the following day and the British Board of Trade chaired by Lord Mersey a few weeks later. Criticism. After the disaster, Ismay was savaged by both the American and the British press for deserting the ship while women and children were still on board. Some papers called him the coward of the Titanic or J. Brute Ismay, and suggested that the White Star flag be changed to a yellow liver. Some ran negative cartoons depicting him deserting the ship. The writer Ben Hecht, then a young newspaperman in Chicago, wrote a scathing poem contrasting the actions of Captain Smith and Ismay. The final verse reads, "To hold your place in the ghastly face of death on the sea at night is a seaman's job, but to flee with the mob is an owner's noble right." Some maintain Ismay followed the women and children first principle, having assisted many women and children himself. Ismay's actions were defended in the official British inquiry, which found Mr. Ismay, after rendering assistance to many passengers, found C collapsible, the last boat on the starboard side actually being lowered. Carter's own behavior and reliability, however, were criticized by Mrs. Lucille Carter, who sued him for divorce in 1914. She testified Carter had left her and their children to fend for themselves after the collision and accused him of cruel and barbarous treatment and indignities to the person. London society ostracized Ismay and labeled him a coward. On 30 June 1913, Ismay resigned as president of International Mercantile Marine and chairman of the White Star Line, to be succeeded by Harold Sanderson. Ismay announced during the United States inquiry that all the vessels of the International Mercantile Marine Company would be equipped with lifeboats in sufficient numbers for all passengers. Following the inquiry, Ismay and the surviving officers of the ship returned to England aboard RMS Adriatic. Titanic controversy. During the congressional investigations, Some passengers testified that during the voyage they heard Ismay pressuring Captain Smith to increase the speed of the Titanic in order to arrive in New York ahead of schedule and generate some free press about the new liner. The book The White Star Line, An Illustrated History 2000 by Paul Loudon Brown states that this was unlikely, and that Ismay's record does not support the notion that he had any motive to do so. Writing on the BBC News magazine website, Rosie Waits reports that Ismay was widely vilified in the United States after the sinking of the Titanic, due to the hostility shown in the yellow press controlled by William Randolph Hearst, who had fallen out with Ismay. Waits writes Ismay was almost universally condemned in America, where the Hearst syndicated press ran a vitriolic campaign against him, labeling him J. Brute Ismay. It published lists of all those who died, but in the column of those saved it had just one name, Ismay's. Following from the Hearst press depiction of Ismay, Waits writes that every subsequent film about Loudon Brown, consultant to the Cameron film, has stated that he thought the antagonistic characterization of Ismay was unfair, and he tried to challenge this. Loudon Brown said, apart from being told, "Under no circumstances are we prepared to adjust the script. One thing they also said is this is what the public expect to see." The 1958 film A Night to Remember did not blame Ismay for the disaster, but also presented him in an unfavorable and cowardly light, while a Titanic-themed episode of the science fiction television series Voyagers portrayed Ismay dressing as a woman in order to sneak into a lifeboat. Lord Mersey, who led the 1912 British inquiry into the sinking of the Titanic, concluded that Ismay had helped many other passengers before finding a place for himself on the last lifeboat to leave the starboard side. Later life. Though cleared of blame by the official British inquiry, Ismay never recovered from the Titanic disaster. Already emotionally repressed and insecure before his voyage on Titanic, the tragedy sent him into a state of deep depression from which he never truly emerged. He kept a low profile afterwards. He lived part of the year in a large cottage, Costello Lodge, near Castle in Connemara. Paul Loudon Brown, in his History of the White Star Line, writes that Ismay continued to be active in business, and that much of his work was for the Liverpool and London Steamship Protection and Indemnity Association Limited, an insurance company founded by his father. According to Loudon Brown, hundreds of thousands of pounds were paid out in insurance claims to the relatives of the Titanic's victims, the misery created by the disaster and its aftermath dealt with by Ismay and his directors with great fortitude, this despite the fact that he could easily have shirked his responsibilities and resigned from the board. He stuck with the difficult task, and during his 25-year chairmanship hardly a page of the company's minutes does not contain some mention of the Titanic disaster. Ismay maintained an interest in maritime affairs. He inaugurated a cadetship called Mercy Used. After the tragedy, Ismay's wife Florence ensured the subject of Titanic was never again discussed within the family. His granddaughter, historian and author Pauline Matarasso, likened her grandfather to a corpse in his later years. Having had the misfortune, one might say the misjudgment, to survive a fact he recognized despairingly, within hours he withdrew into a silence in which his wife made herself complicit, imposing it on the family circle and thus ensuring. In his personal life, when in London, he would attend concerts by himself at St. George's Hall or visit a cinema, at other times wandering through the London parks and engaging transients in conversation. A family friend observed the spectre of Titanic was never far from Ismay's thoughts, saying that he continually tormented himself with useless speculation as to how the disaster could possibly have been avoided. At a Christmas-time family gathering in 1936, less than a year before Ismay's death, one of his grandsons by his daughter Evelyn, who had learned Ismay had been involved in maritime shipping, inquired if his grandfather had ever been shipwrecked. Ismay finally broke his quarter-century silence on the tragedy that had blighted his life, replying, "Yes, I was once in a ship which was believed to be unsinkable." Death. Ismay's health declined in the 1930s following a diagnosis of diabetes, which worsened in early 1936 when the illness resulted in the amputation of his right leg below the knee. He was subsequently largely confined to a wheelchair. On the morning of 14 October 1937, he collapsed in his bedroom at his residence in Mayfair, London, after suffering a massive stroke, which left him unconscious, blind, and mute. 3 days later, on 17 October, Bruce Ismay died at the age of 74. Ismay's funeral was held at St. Paul's, Knightsbridge, on 21 October 1937, and he is buried in Putney Vale Cemetery, London. He left a very considerable personal estate, which excluding property was valued at £693,305, approximately equivalent to £41,520,000 in 2018. After his death, his wife Florence renounced her British subject status in order to restore her American citizenship on 14 November 1949. Julia Florence Ismay née Sheffield died 31 December 1963, aged 96, in Kensington. Portrayals Ernst Fritz Furbringer 1943 Titanic. Lowell Gilmore 1955 You Are There, The Sinking of the Titanic TV episode, 22 May 1955. Frank Lawton 1958 A Night to Remember. Ian Holm 1979 SOS. Titanic TV film. Sam Chude, Jr. 1982 Voyagers of the Titanic. Roger Rees 1996 Titanic TV miniseries / 2 parts. Jonathan Hyde 1997 Titanic film. David Garrison 1997 Titanic Broadway musical. David Haynes 2006 Titanic Broadway musical Canadian premiere. Eric Breeden 1999 The Titanic Chronicles TV documentary. Ken Marshall 2003 Ghosts of the Abyss documentary. Christopher Wright 2005 Titanic, Birth of a Legend TV documentary. Mark Tandy 2008 The Unsinkable Titanic TV documentary. Christopher Villiers 2011 The Curiosity, What Sank Titanic TV series. James Wilby 2012 Titanic TV series / 4 episodes. Ray O'Brien 2012 Titanic, Blood and Steel TV series / 12 episodes. Julian Ball 2012 Iceberg Right Ahead, London stage play. Michael Maloney 2012 Sherlock Holmes The Adventure of the Perfidious Mariner audio play. Derek Mahan After the Titanic poem.